For some background context, this was back in the 90s, when our only option was a landline phone, and we only had dial-up internet. I was about 8 or 9 years old when my mom started leaving me at home with my oldest brother while she went to work. My brother was much older than me, around 17 at the time. As most teenage boys, his favorite thing to do was sleep really late during the day and stay up all night playing video games. PS1, don't come for me, I'm getting old. I remember being bored playing with my Barbies in the living room of my house with the blinds wide open to let in some light and save a bit on the electricity. I would sit there for hours at a time and play. When Mom was gone, she always told us to answer the phone when it rang, in case she was calling to check on us and make sure we were okay. I remember one day specifically, I answered the phone and just heard some loud breathing on the other end. I kept on saying hello, but no one would reply, so eventually I hung up. This went on daily for about 2 months. It was always in the morning time when my brother was fast asleep. Being a naive 8 or 9-year-old girl, I didn't really think too much of it, and eventually the calls stopped all on their own. A few months go by since then, and I'm sitting in my living room floor again when the phone suddenly rings. I hear the same breathing again and say, "Hello, who is this?" To my surprise though, this time a man replies and says, "Hello, kitten. Do you remember me?" I remember being pleasantly surprised that he called me kitten, but replying that he must have the wrong number. This is where it gets really creepy. He then replies, "No, kitten, I have the right number. You're wearing a nice little kitty shirt right now." I remember looking down, immediately panicking and hanging up the phone when I saw the tabby kitten on my shirt. The phone rings again and I refuse to answer it. I ran to wake up my brother, and he sleepily followed me to the living room. The phone rings again, and he answers it, but no one's there. He unplugs the phone and tells me that it must be my imagination. Just leave him alone so he can go to sleep. I was quite scared, so I decided to close all the windows and sit on the couch until my mom got home that afternoon. That night I told my mom about what happened, but my brother told her I was just making it up and that he didn't see or hear anything. I think my mom believed me, but she just told me to hang up the phone if it wasn't her, and to never open the door for a stranger. I agreed and told her I wouldn't. That next day, my mom was off from work, and she took me out to the store with her. We were walking around when I noticed a man in a long trench coat. I thought the coat was weird, but I didn't really have any other thoughts about him. We then ran into one of my mom's friends who has a daughter my age. My mom and her friend were chatting away, and my friend and I were standing a few feet from them, messing around with some birthday cards. We went around to the other side of the cards to look, just out of sight of our moms. Suddenly, the man with the trench coat was right near us, looking at the same cards too. He picked up a card and turned to me and my friend and said, "Hello." Being polite, we responded back. He then started picking up random cards, saying that he was trying to get his daughter something and asking us what we liked. My friend pointed to a random card. He smiled and said that was nice. He picked up another card and showed it to us. The card had kittens all over it. He looks directly at me and says, "I'm sure you like kittens, don't you?" I didn't really know how to respond, and I remember feeling extremely nervous. He smiled when he saw me getting anxious and said, "Kittens and Barbies." This kicked my fight or flight into action at the young age of 9. I nervously laughed and said we had to go back to our moms right now. The man then reached out and grabbed a hold of my arm. My friend took off running around the corner to get my mom. At this point, the man tried to pull me to the front of the store, but I kicked him as hard as I could. I kicked him so hard I went flying out of his grip. He then got up and ran out the door at about the same time that my mom made it over to me. The police were called, and a report was filed. To my knowledge, though, they never found the man. My mom was extremely paranoid after hearing the link between the phone calls and the incident. She found a new house in the city right over from us right away, not even a month later. Thankfully, that was the last time I ever heard from him. For the record, my wife and I are both pretty normal folks. We don't do drugs. We're social drinkers, but let's say we don't have a lot of friends, except other couples with children. So basically, we don't drink that much either. All that to state that when this event took place, we were both absolutely lucid and not under the influence. I'm 200% sure of what I saw. My only regret is that I didn't record it or take any pictures for evidence. It was summer of 2013. My wife was 5 months pregnant, so we decided to look for a nice house to rent on the countryside. We browsed a well-known website and found a small villa near a vineyard. The owner called us very quickly. We'll call him Jared. Jared was a fellow in his late 50s. His picture on the website displayed a posh man wearing very small glasses. He was really caring and very nice. After a little research on the internet, this guy was running an art gallery. He told us that he wouldn't be there personally to give us the key, but that a colleague would welcome us. The day we arrived, a Slavic woman in her 40s was there. She gave us the keys, jumped in her black sports car, and left right away. It only took about 5 minutes. The house was very beautiful. We were so excited to have so much room just for us. 15 minutes after the check-in, we were both having a little drink by the swimming pool. Something felt weird about the inside of the house, though. It had clearly been furbished by a home staging designer, as everything was perfect and new. Somehow the frames had generic pictures inside, like stock pictures. The poses seemed too unnatural, and you couldn't recognize one person from any one picture to another. My wife decided to store our empty luggage on top of a big cupboard. She clumsily hit a little box, though, and made it fall over to the floor. It contained 2 pencils and a keychain with 2 small keys. We put it back where it fell from and started to feel a bit hungry, so we went over to cook dinner. The weather was pretty lovely. On that very night, we stayed up on the roof and watched the sun set together. Then my wife felt exhausted and went to bed. I was out reading on the roof when my eyes got stuck onto a small staircase behind the pool house. I tried not to pay attention, but I got so curious that I just ended up heading right for that staircase. The stairs were made of steel and led down to a little cellar. It was a dusty and quite smelly corridor with a solid oak door at the end of it. The door was closed by 2 padlocks. I realized I wasn't minding my own business, so I headed back upstairs. An hour later, though, I was still thinking about that door and what was behind it. I suddenly remembered the keychain with the 2 small keys. Now it seemed so obvious. I couldn't help it. I went back there to try out the keys. Once in front of that door, I was now sure the key would match. The padlocks gave in about 2 seconds. When I opened up the door, a strong smell hit me, like mold mixed with various chemicals. It was pretty clear that I had just entered a photo lab. On a shelf, hundreds of pictures, going from nudes to hardcore pornography. On 5 of them, I positively recognized Gerald with a black woman. She was attached by a rope to the wrists. Utterly shocked, I found 2 plastic boxes, each full with photographs of teen pornography. By the writings on the pictures, it went all the way from 2004 to the present day. Near the Red Room, I found even more pictures of very violent bondage scenes. The women all had bruises and cuts all over their bodies. There were also old cameras and about a dozen tapes, but my heart was already on the brink of explosion, so I didn't have the courage to watch any of them. I closed the door and sat by the pool for 45 minutes. I needed to put myself back together and decide what I needed to do. I showed the pictures to my wife, and we left the house that very night. We called the cops on our way home, and they told us they'd keep us informed, but of course they never did. 1 week later, I had a new message on my answer phone. It was Gerald. He apologized to us, stating that everything I saw in those pictures was staged. He insisted he worked for magazines, and sometimes they ordered some shocking pictures. I never believed an inch of what he said, though, and neither did my wife. I tried to call him back to tell him that he had to refund us, as the website asked him to do, but he never answered. I tried calling him once again 3 weeks later to ask him to refund again, but instead this time a grocery store picked up. After that I tried to look him up, but there was absolutely no trace of that man anywhere on the internet. To this day, we don't know for sure. Still, every now and then, we bring it up knowing we'll never have an answer. So when I was 15, I was completely incorrigible and hung out with a lot of not-so-great people. My main friend group hung out at this house that we dubbed our house. Our house was technically a foreclosed property that had previously been owned by one of my friend's parents. The parents had moved out and left their 2 adult children, who were the siblings of my friend my age, living at that house. Anyway, every single day after school, my friends and I would meet up with the older siblings at our house and get absolutely hammered. Around 4 p.m., everyone would show up with fifths and drugs, and it was just a constant party every night. And things were pretty out of control there. One night, we were all drunk as fuck as usual, and I got into a massive fight with my boyfriend. I decided I wanted to leave, but no one would drive me home, and all of the buses had stopped running already. It was very late, probably 12 or 1 in the morning. I lived 6 miles away. This was an urban area that was pretty sketchy to walk at night. But I was so pissed and drunk that I just told everyone to go fuck themselves and left right away. I managed to get about 3/4 of the way home without incident. I hadn't even seen a single car or another person, and while I was genuinely pretty scared, I felt more confident the closer I got to home. I was crossing the freeway overpass that glides down into the valley where my neighborhood is. All of a sudden, I could hear a whirring noise, and I saw lights coming from behind me. I looked over my shoulder to see a bus coming up alongside. The destination mark was blank, and the lights inside were very dim. I turned away and kept walking, and as the bus got closer, it slowed down and drove up right next to me. This goes on for about 30 seconds with the bus slowly following me, and I start to feel genuinely uncomfortable and glance up. The bus stops, and the driver opens up the door. He wasn't wearing a uniform. I still remember him pretty clearly, actually. 50-something, salt and pepper hair, medium length for a man, thick darker gray beard, with copper wire rimmed glasses. He leaned against the driver's wheel and looked me up and down. "Hey, you look really young," he says. I, like an idiot, stuttered that I was 15, thinking, like most 15-year-olds, that 15 really isn't that young. He smiled really slowly. "This is a dangerous area to be walking alone. There are all types of men out there, you know. Why don't you get on the bus?" Now, I may have been drunk, I may have been 15, and I may have been deludedly self-confident, but I wasn't that stupid. Something just didn't feel right, you know. I told him no thank you, and quickly started walking once again. For a while, I could see the bus behind me wasn't moving at all. Then I heard its brakes lift, and it started creeping up behind me again. By this time, I was over the bridge and walking down a sidewalk with apartment complexes on either side. The bus pulled up again, and once again opened its doors whilst following me. The man again told me, "It's not safe." He asked me to get on the bus once more. I told him no, I'm really almost home, it's fine. I started walking even faster. He closed the doors, but the entire time he was just keeping pace with me. I was now really starting to worry. I finally decided to give up and just run as fast as I could, so I started running. At first, I put some distance between myself and the bus, but he was still right behind me. I slowed down when I felt far enough away and caught my breath but kept walking. The next thing I know, he sped up and started gaining on me once again, honking his horn the entire time. I screamed and fell over, still super drunk and now extremely scared. I got up and scurried off into the neighborhood at my side. I hid behind one of the carports. I could still see the road from my location, and the bus had completely stopped. The doors opened, and the man came out to the doorway and looked all around in every direction. He lingered there for a long time before I finally heard him say, "Ah, shit!" He got back in his seat, closed the doors, and sped off into the night. It took me another 30 minutes to get home, even though it was less than a mile at that point, because I took a convoluted way through bushes, yards, and apartment complexes, terrified that the man was still cruising around searching for me.